I wanted to take a break from videos like X-Men fan casting or what the hell's going on with Captain America to talk about DC, ostensibly the other studio in the big two, the studio that is run by James Gunn and Peter Safran, and even though Creature Commandos came out like this year or late last year, whenever that was, its first big thing is the Superman movie that's coming out in July. And there have been little bits of news coming out of DC that I've talked about, but we got another one of those events like we got back in 2023 where James Gunn and Peter Safran just talked to a bunch of people from media. This wasn't as focused as the last one where it was about discussing a new slate of movies. This was more about introducing some ideas and answering questions, because the entertainment media and people like me who make videos about this stuff have a lot of questions about what's going on in the new DCU. Now, I was not invited, which is fine because I had a very busy weekend. I don't know if I would have even been able to fit a trip to this presentation in my busy schedule, because I've got so much stuff to do, a lot of Reacher to watch. But anyway, I wanted to make a video talking about all the stuff that was announced. Now, I'm going to go off of a Variety article, although there are a bunch of other articles out there, and this isn't like an interview where all of the outlets are reporting on the same quotes. Like, these are all people that were here, so the reporting's all a little bit different, but it more or less follows the same pattern. First thing that I think is very interesting, apparently the plan for DC Studios is 2 live-action movies and 1 animated movie per year, and 2 live-action shows and 2 animated shows a year. Now, if you look at this year, obviously, we're not going to hit that target. We have Superman and we have Peacemaker. Next year, Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow, the Green Lantern show. I don't know if, like, Harley Quinn counts in this calculation. I think My Adventures with Superman at least probably does, which we'll get to later. But either way, that is a very ambitious plan from DC Studios. One movie that we're definitely going to get, I think is worth mentioning here, is The Batman 2. Now, this apparently has been delayed to 2027. I think this was already known. The deal seems to be they have a great outline of a script, but they don't have the script finished yet, so they are not shooting it yet. And apparently, James has been asked by everybody, and Peter's been asked by everybody, is Robert Pattinson going to be the Batman in the new DCU? The answer seems to be not yet. That is not the plan. And The Batman 2 is definitely not expected at this point to be in the new DCU. I would imagine part of that just comes from Matt Reeves just not wanting to do that, not wanting to have to fit in, a bunch of billboards for Cord Industries or whatever. Work into your story references to that time a big giant monster fought Superman in the middle of Metropolis. And also, it doesn't seem to be super clear if Robert Pattinson wants to do that, because one of the other questions they had is Robert Pattinson going to also be the Batman in Brave and the Bold, which is the new DCU's Batman movie? It seems to be about Batman finding his son Damian Wayne. The thing that we learned from the way they were talking about it here was he does not know he has a son, so I guess Damian just shows up, which I guess is what you would expect. But I had not even expected that Robert Pattinson was thinking about doing this. Robert Pattinson just seems like a guy who does lots of stuff and funky, cool art stuff, and just I don't think he would want to do 2 Batman movies in a row instead of making, Mickey 17 or Mickey 18, I guess is what it would be. But beyond that, because maybe they're both amazing. He's I just want to make amazing movies, and these Batman movies are amazing. It always seemed like the way they were going to differentiate the Batmaniverse from the new DCU was just to have 2 different actors, play it. And Robert Pattinson would be this, young Batman year 1 kind of version of the character. And then we get someone and I don't think this would be a good idea, but Josh Brolin or something to play the Batman of the new DCU, who's much older, who has a secret son. Now, I think, especially if the son is 10, like Damian usually is in the comics, that means we could use a 30-year-old Batman, technically. There's nothing, that doesn't work out there. So, Robert Pattinson totally could technically do that, but it just feels like in the new DCU, we're going to get a Batman who's a little bit older, maybe in his 40s, and then has been doing Batman stuff for a while, so long, at least 10 years, that now he has a kid from older Batman stuff. But either way, really not much to say about these. More to say about Clayface. We have the director for Clayface now. It is James Watkins, who directed that movie, Speak No Evil. This is interesting because it seems like the way that James and Peter talk about this is Mike Flanagan, who makes all those shows on Netflix that people love, and I think, some of them are pretty cool, just came to them with the script and was like, I would like to make a Clayface movie. Here is my script, or here's an outline or something. And they were like, you know what, this is really good. Let's do it. So I think Flanagan is producing, and then James Watkins is directing this movie. We don't know if this is about the Basil Karlo version of Clayface, because there have been multiple Clayfaces, and if this is, it seems like this technically would be the same Clayface in the Creature Commandos, but they said specifically it is not going to be played by Alan Tudyk, even though he voiced the character in Creature Commandos. And they made a distinction that, if you are in a show and you do a little voice, but that's not your main character that you're playing. That like doesn't count in terms of vocal and actor continuity. And I think that's fine because I don't think that many people watch Creature Commandos, so I don't think people will be like, oh my god, not Alan Tudyk, my favorite guy who played Clayface this one time. And then B, I think it would get confusing with the Harley Quinn show because he's Clayface in that, and he's a very different kind of Clayface, I imagine, than this Mike Flanagan horror version of Clayface. Now, it seems like it's going to rely on body horror. I think a Clayface movie could be cool. People have been talking about that forever. I think for a lot of people, like myself, who grew up on Batman the Animated Series, they did some really interesting things with Clayface. Mr. Freeze, I'd say, got the biggest, like, glow up in the animated series, but Clayface is another one who I think the focus and also some of the pathos and some of the sadness in that character, like, it was interesting to see it animated and in action as opposed to in a comic, I guess. And it's an interesting story because it's never been told in a Batman movie. They didn't have anybody cast for Clayface, and apparently it's going to start shooting summer of this year, so like within a couple of months, which is makes sense. If you want to get 2 live action movies and 2 animated movies out a year, you got to start making them. And Supergirl's next year. I could see this being a pretty quick turnaround, like a, December, even maybe an October release for next year. People asked James and Peter at this event if they were going to make another season of Penguin, and they were like, we don't know. Penguin's good. Everybody likes Penguin. It's winning lots of awards now, but it seems like that is not like a conversation that they're actively having because, as you'll see, they're having way more conversations actively. And, I feel like it's one of those things where you just want to be done with Penguin. You get all the awards and then the season's over, and then you start talking about where to go next. But okay, so some animated stuff. First of all, they gave a little bit of an update on that dynamic duo animated movie about Jason Todd and Dick Grayson, some sort of like Robins. I mean, probably both of them aren't Robin at this point. I mean, they could be. This could be like one of them's Robin and the other one just shows up. I imagine this will change the continuity of what they usually are like, especially because in this event, Peter Safran said that Dynamic Duo will be a good on-ramp for families into the world of Gotham, which means this probably isn't going to be like this super tragic story. I mean, it could be, like Spider-Verse is for families, and it also deals with themes that I could see playing out here. But I guess Jason Todd, when he was introduced into DC Comics, was supposed to be like a more serious kind of version of Robin in that he had, like real problems and he was kind of troubled. Then he was killed, and then he got resurrected as like the Robin who kills and has guns, and he felt like a much more adult character. Whereas Nightwing, I think, is played both ways. Sometimes he is more adult, but sometimes he's just fun, and like you could easily make a Nightwing movie or show out of that new Tom Taylor run. At least I think you more or less could. And it would be, all ages family friendly. Whereas I don't think you could do that with like Red Hood and the Outlaws with Jason Todd. But maybe this is going to be a story where like they're both Robin, and that's very interesting. Seems like it maybe will be in continuity. They were not as explicit about a lot of this animated stuff. One of the other things they were talking about was an animated Blue Beetle series that would be following the Joel Maridueña movie from 2023. I think that's a great idea. I like that Blue Beetle, and I think a lot of people are into that character. I think that is a character that will lend himself really well to animation just because of how exciting Blue Beetle can be and how imaginative his powers can be. Like, I think there's something to making that character live action, especially all the human stuff in Blue Beetle's life. I can see why you wanted to have a lot of the drama of that feel very real. On the other hand, I think you can get a lot of cool stuff done with animation that would just be tough to do in live action. Then Gunn and Safran said there are 3 younger skewing projects coming up. Now, these are things we had never heard of before. I think at least one of them is something people would have maybe seen coming. But okay, first one, My Adventures with Green Lantern. So this seems like it takes place in the My Adventures with Superman-verse, if for no other reason than just the font is the same and the title is the same. Like, that would suggest that this is another one of those stories. And we have seen, I believe, Green Lanterns in that show very briefly, and that show very much focuses on space and the Kryptonian side of Superman's heritage. So getting another story set in that universe, but instead of focusing on the Superman villains, now it's focusing on the Green Lantern villains. Makes sense. Apparently the lead of this is going to be Jessica Cruz, one of the more recent Green Lanterns. Apparently a ring shows up, and then a ship full of alien monsters or something from a Green Lantern war also shows up with the ring. The ring chooses Jessica Cruz. She has to deal with it. I imagine, since it is aimed at children, this will be a younger version of Jessica Cruz, even though like Jessica Cruz is usually on the younger side of Justice League characters. I think that is interesting for a couple of reasons. One, it's not in the new DCU continuity, because My Adventures with Superman is not in that continuity either. If they are in the same universe, although I'd have to assume, right? The second thing that's interesting is a Green Lantern show that I imagine will be coming out around the same time as the Lanterns show, which is very much an adult, mystery, crime, noir, whatever it's going to be. We don't know too much about it, but does not feature the same characters, right? We have Hal Jordan and Jon Stewart in the live action show for adults, and we have Jessica Cruz in this show for kids. But it's interesting that we will probably have a time where we'll be focusing a lot on the Green Lanterns. It's funny how that's worked out for the new DCU, in that there will be another season of My Adventures with Superman, I assume, kind of soon. The first movie is a Superman movie, and then the second movie is a Supergirl movie. It doesn't feel like it's spaced out the same way you would expect, but then it kind of comes in waves, because then eventually we'll get a lot of Green Lantern stuff. Then there's going to be an animated show called DC Superpowers. I want to make sure I get this right, because this seems to be some sort of academy where the next generation of superheroes are being trained by Principal Martian Manhunter. So right off the bat, obviously this isn't in continuity with all the rest of it. Maybe the animated stuff will be its own thing. I don't know. This is where it gets complicated, James and Peter, and I don't think it needs to be this is one universe, this is another universe. I think this is all fine, and I like the idea of trying a lot of stuff and seeing what works. Part of what's tricky about this conference and what was tricky about the last conference is, since then, we've heard a lot of things from DC. One of the things we've heard is that they want to make this universe cohesive. This was a reset so that we got this more cohesive universe. Now, obviously, stuff like the Batman, that was in production long before, the new DCU existed. And if they're going to make a sequel to that, there's a world where it doesn't fit into the universe. There's a world where it does, and that would be great too. But that makes sense. The idea that we're going to make new animated stuff that might not be in continuity is interesting, because it does feel like we're going to continue to fracture this thing. And for kids, there's a different Spider-Man cartoon with Spin and Ghost Spider and all that stuff that has nothing to do with your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, that kind of definitely almost has nothing to do with the Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's the official Spider-Man. So you can have a lot of different things out there. It's just weird that we're coming into this with more questions. But this superhero kid school is going to be Lightning, Flash, a Flash, doesn't say which Flash. I would imagine one of the younger Flashes, probably Wally, Plastic Man, Aquagirl, Green Lantern, again, not very specific about which Green Lantern, and Terra, Teen Titans villain. They're hero turned villain, kind of, in the Teen Titans cartoon, at least. In the book, it's crazy how she is positioned. Having read that for the first time not too long ago, expecting the same kind of thing, where she's maybe it wants to be a hero and she's being blackmailed by Slade or whatever with that. It's nope, it's just she's a bad guy who's working with Slade and is cool with it, wants to do bad guy stuff. It's fine. It's unclear if that is going to be the same Green Lantern, right? If maybe Jessica Cruz in the Green Lantern show is going to go to this academy. It's going to be a lead-in here. I don't know. We've seen a lot of versions of shows like this. We've seen Young Justice, obviously, and then Teen Titans before that, Teen Titans Go. There was also that, I think it was called DC Superhero Kids, or maybe it was just specifically girls. I can't remember, but there have been other things like that existed. But interesting that we're doing this. And then the last one, Starfire. So a show about Starfire, or a movie about Starfire, makes complete sense. This character is incredibly popular, has a very fun energy. I think an energy that's very different from what a lot of the rest of these heroes and shows and movies you would expect. I guess she's kind of like Supergirl, but in Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow is going to be the true grit, kind of what that book is usually like. Whereas this feels like it's going to be a lot more focused at kids, obviously, because these last three things, like I said, all kid focused. But this is going to be about having adventures in space, and it mentions a couple of specific things I think are interesting. Apparently, Coriander, Starfire, steals a spaceship, goes on a joyride, and then meets a bunch of people. So she's going to meet a space biker named Crush, which people that are familiar with recent-ish DC comics will know is Lobo's daughter. Interesting that we're getting a Lobo and then we're getting Crush here. Character Plant-Loving Fern, which I had to Google this. Maybe there's other Ferns running around. The Fern, when you Google Fern DC Comics, you get a character from Crisis on Infinite Earths who was around very briefly, but I don't know, maybe they're just using her. And then, most importantly, Princess Amethyst of Gemworld, which is one of those characters that's not specifically a deep cut, especially because they did Amethyst in one of the new, I think it was Young Justice books. I think it's just one of those things that if you were around in, I want to say the 80s when this was happening, it feels like it's oh my god, Amethyst from the Gem World. But I don't really know too much about her outside of reading about Amethyst in that Young Justice book. They also mentioned space dolphins, which I know in DC Comics is something like Lobo hates everybody except the space dolphins, who he likes and are cool. I don't know what else they're like, if they have other significance. Maybe the Crush story will be about her rescuing the space dolphins. I don't know. I think they're like super intelligent aliens, like everything in space. But this is cool. I think this is a good idea. I wonder, is this going to sync up with the Teen Titans movie that they also talk about during this press conference? Because apparently Ann Naghiera, who I believe wrote the Supergirl script, is also writing a Teen Titans script, and that's something that has been leaked but never confirmed until this meeting, as apparently something that they're working on. Now, what audience is that aimed at? Is Starfire going to be a prequel to that? I don't know. Like, that's why I think part of this is kind of frustrating. I like it. I'm excited about this. I think it's all going to be fun. And I think this is obviously different than when Kevin Feige goes on stage. It goes, look at all the stuff we're making, and then some of it doesn't get made or whatever. Like, that, it used to be that it would all get made, or at least most of it would get made. You know, you'd have an Inhumans movie that wouldn't get made. But like, that was always this very clear, like, here's the timeline. These things are all connected. Cool. And as Disney Plus got introduced, it got a little bit trickier. But then you got the multiverse, so it was like, I don't know, maybe the Spider-Man thing is in continuity eventually. Who knows? With this, I almost want them to make a new brand of like, this is DC Kids. This is a different thing. So when we do Starfire, it won't be connected to this. And obviously, this is not a humongous issue right now. These things are not coming out anytime soon. I'm sure by the time they do, we'll know what's connected to what. But the purpose of like explaining it and like showing a title card and saying like, oh, the fun new Starfire show, it does make me go, wait, but then is that the direction we're going with the Teen Titans movie that we're also talking about at this conference or not? And if it's like, no, then why bother? Not like why bother, but why bother doing the press conference instead of just sending out an email with all the things in it and like the little log lines? Because I don't feel like I have more information. And that is, I'd say, the most basic information you should get from one of these. He also confirmed that they're working on a Sergeant Rock movie. Sergeant Rock, old army character. People, I don't even know when people would be familiar with. I feel like Sergeant Rock showed up in one of the Crisis on Infinite Earths like animated movies recently, and he was in Creature Commandos because he was working with the Tin Man. So Luca Guadagnino, who had worked on Challengers and Queer, apparently wants to make a Sergeant Rock movie, and they're going to make it. It seemed like Daniel Craig, who was also in Queer, was interested in being Sergeant Rock, which makes sense. Like, he fits right into that role, or at least could if you wanted to make like a little older Sergeant Rock. But now apparently that's like not something they're really actively looking at. And again, what he says in the thing, I forget if this was James or Peter Safran, but one of them's like, listen, we think about all this stuff. So like, if you're like, oh, are they going to put the actor who's in most of these movies, you know, this director makes, is he going to get into this other movie that the director's making? Like, of course we've thought about it. We don't know. If we knew, we'd tell you, but we don't know. We don't know if like, oh, is the guy from the Flash show going to be in this? Maybe. I don't know. We haven't decided yet, but like, we have thought about it. And I think that makes sense. I think these conversations, you know, they must go through so many of these. I do wish there was like a little bit more information, because even in this, the sense that I get from like when they're talking about it is one of them was like, you know what? Also, I know people who talk about Sergeant Rock. We don't know if Daniel Craig's going to be in that or not. And then what are the other ones? Like James or Peter will go like, wait, did we announce Sergeant Rock? Oh, not yet, but I guess it's out now. So like, just give me a slate. And I know what they would say. And this is what I think James says in this is like, well, we don't want to just announce movies and shows until we have a script we like. Also in these articles, it's like he says, it's hard enough to make a movie with a good script, but then it's really, really hard to make a good movie with like a script that's not great, or, you know, you want to make sure you have the best script before you make the movie. And why bother announcing and talking about it until we have that? Fair. But I think looking at this press conference, it reminds you that like there's a bunch of things that they don't have scripts for that they're talking about. And I think that's fine. But again, it's like, if that's what we're doing, then just, I don't know, put the slate out then. Say Sergeant Rock's on the slate. I don't know what they should be doing. I don't know. Marvel's the only one that's ever done this properly. You know, Star Wars kind of tried to do this and they didn't make most of the things on their list. You know, Dark Universe put out the picture, the wonderful picture. But like, how do you announce a cinematic universe when you're still in the process of deciding what's actually going to get made and what's not going to get made? When you're thinking about it in terms of movies and TV shows first, cinematic universe second. And I think that is a completely valid and probably the right way to do this. Like, that is the right way to think about it. But on the other hand, it makes the connection points confusing for people, especially when like we expect certain things because they were announced, like Swamp Thing. James Mangold, Swamp Thing, love that. Like he's great. Apparently complete unknown, haven't seen it yet, but is good. And Logan is obviously one of the best comic book movies ever made. It seems like the ball's in James Mangold's court when it comes to Swamp Thing right now, and it's just not the priority. So maybe they're not gonna finish it soon. Maybe it won't end up being part of phase 1. Seems like we're at the same boat with Booster Gold. They were saying the Booster Gold team, they had a writer on board who was really interested, and then either they dropped out or something, it kind of fizzled out. It stinks because Booster Gold is one of those things that I think if you ask me or a million other comic book YouTubers, like, what's one character who you think they should make movies and TV shows of? And if you get to write an official comic or movie or something with one of these characters, who would it be? Booster Gold is at the top of a lot of our lists because he's such a fun, flawed, goofy, but also very interesting, complex character. And there was a while where it was going to be part of the team from the Righteous Gemstones, which I think is very interesting, especially because that is another show about frauds and people, you know, trying to maintain an image. So, you know, I mean, we could imagine like a Wally Goggins, you know, Uncle Baby Billy from that show, but what if he was a superhero? Like that's super interesting. It seems like that and Booster Gold are not priorities anymore, which stinks because I think that would have been pretty fun. Paradise Lost and Waller, two other shows that came up in this presentation and are seemingly kind of on the back burner. It seems like Waller's being more actively worked on, but there have been some difficulties with it. I think originally it was supposed to come out before Peacemaker Season 2, but now it's coming out after. I've heard rumors of different characters making it in there. Some stuff very recently, so I wouldn't be surprised if we start hearing more about that. And obviously, you know, Waller's a big part of Creature Commandos. Rick Flag Sr. seems like he's going to be in, you know, the Superman movie, and then Peacemaker's like, why wouldn't he also be in this? That would make sense. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if that show gets changed. The title of it is currently Waller, and it's about Amanda Waller. Sure. Viola Davis is great in that role, and that's interesting. However, if what it is another kind of version of S.H.I.E.L.D., like a Checkmate, which is what exists in DC Comics, which is a more nefarious spy organization, I think that would be an interesting name for a show like that. And I could see a world where it's like, we should make a Checkmate show. But if you want to sell it, it's like, we should name it after a character people recognize. Well, we already got the Peacemaker show. Let's do a Waller show. And that'll just be Checkmate. So I wouldn't be surprised if eventually this just does get changed to a Checkmate thing. Because the idea of it is fun, but maybe based on its place in the new DCU, it'll make less sense if it's Waller focused and more sense if it's, you know, Rick Flag Sr. or some other character focused. Mr. Terrific, maybe. I don't know. And Paradise Lost, we barely heard anything about. You know, we got Cersei and Creature Commandos, but also it seems like it's tricky because of how Wonder Woman 3, there was like a little bit of weirdness about like, we're making it, and then they're not making it, and then I think people associated with the first two were like, no, they are. And then these guys had to come out and be like, we're not. And that is weird. So maybe they want to take some time, especially because Wonder Woman's like one of the only things that people actually remember fondly from the DCEU. So like, if we're going to remake things or like give characters like Superman a fresh start, maybe we wait until people are like really clamoring for a new Diana so they don't have to compare her to the old one that people really liked. Obviously not everybody, but like a lot of people did. Very popular movie and character. But then they were talking about The Authority. And this is a movie I've thought about a lot because obviously, you know, I've made pitches for casting The Authority. I've read The Authority books, and this was not something I knew anything about before. They say in this interview, it's a very, very big movie. If you're going to do The Authority properly, and some story elements that are in Superman and some of the other films that we fast-tracked, step a little bit on The Authority. The script also had a harder time coming along, so the film hasn't been much of a priority because it has been subsumed by everything from The Brave and the Bold to Paradise Lost, which makes a lot of sense, especially because it seems maybe like the Superman movie will be about Superman. Is he something that makes sense in this world anymore, or is he like a, you know, character from a bygone era and we need new, cooler, more tough superheroes made by corporations and stuff like that? Is kind of the pitch for The Authority, not really, but like a little bit. And, you know, if you're going to make a Superman movie with that theme, why would you then go and make an Authority movie right after that that has pretty much that theme also? Yeah, we have the Engineer in this movie, although Angie doesn't seem like she's got like liquid metal skin I mean, just based on set photos. You know, maybe this is going to be like Engineer Origins. I'm not sure. I'm not surprised that this is the hardest one to make, because I think out of all of the movies that were announced, this is the weirdest one, because the Authority is not a big part of DC Comics. It makes sense because they feel very Guardians-y and very Creature Commandos-y and very Peacemaker-y, Suicide Squad, like all the stuff that James Gunn loves to make. Anti-hero team, you know, trying to do some good. I mean, maybe they're more bad than good, but that's the angle that a lot of his stuff takes, especially, you know, these very out there Warren Ellis characters who have like really weird powers or from weird dimensions and whatever. I don't know. I'm a little bummed that we don't seem like Authority is gonna like happen anytime soon. I'm pretty sure I saw rumors not related to this meeting, but maybe, you know, a month ago, they were thinking about animating it, which I think is interesting because some of the powers like Jack Hawksmoor, those are tough to do in live action, I bet. You know, a man who can control cities and stuff. Be tough to do in animation too, but I can see why you maybe would want to start there. But like the fact that we don't know, I think means we're probably not going to see this for a while. I think that's everything. The only other thing that they talked about was Matthew Orton, who wrote Moon Knight. Apparently was writing, or was rumored to be writing, this Bane Deathstroke movie or whatever. No one really knows what it is. Seems like it's maybe some sort of team up. It seems like, if you've read it, it's Secret Six. And, you know, maybe Deathstroke instead of Deadshot, like a different lineup for that team, but like a conglomeration of supervillains who, again, come together to do anti-hero stuff together, like the Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever. Like, that makes sense. And Bane has been on that team. I don't think Deathstroke was. Deadshot definitely was, but you know, you could put him in there. Like Creature Commandos, it's just another opportunity for a Suicide Squad-y story, but without a Suicide Squad and without the government. So that kind of is an angle that hasn't been done much yet. But like overall, I know I've been maybe sounding a little bit negative here at the end, mostly because we've been talking about some of the projects that I was excited about, Booster Gold and Authority, that don't seem like they're moving ahead very actively. But beyond that, I think we got a lot of good information out of this. A new Starfire cartoon is very cool. The Robert Pattinson thing continues to be confusing, but I'm not surprised. Animated Blue Beetle I like. Clayface we'll see. And again, I know I've said this before, I trust James Gunn more than like anybody making these kind of movies today. So I think that overall gives me more hope that these will be great and this universe will be cool and interesting than any presentation with logos and stuff ever could. I'm very excited for Superman in July. I came out of this with some questions. I think a lot of us did. And I hope that maybe after Superman, a lot of those questions become clearer. The universe is clearer. We'll see. Mortimer's here. He's excited about this. I don't know why. What are you excited about? Are you excited about the cat? Maybe he'll be in one of the Green Lantern things. Yeah, Mortimer loves Dexstar. But you know what else Mortimer loves? This video sponsor, Nebula. Nebula is a subscription streaming service that I helped to create with a bunch of my other YouTube friends. People you definitely know if you like my channel, like Patrick Willems, Captain Midnight, Big Joel, H Bomber Guy, Princess Weeks, and a bunch of others. Go to the Culture tab and just poke around. You will find someone you already love. And for my Nando V Movies and Nando Cut videos, the entire Nando Cinematic Universe, they all go up early on Nebula. The Nando V Movies videos are usually a week early. The Nando Cut videos are usually closer to a day or so. But when it comes to a movie review, that can mean the difference between me recommending you immediately see a movie like Deadpool and Wolverine, or me warning you that you immediately see a movie like Madam Web. Either way, see Madam Web. Madam Web's great. You can also download videos to the Nebula app and watch them wherever you want. And we're adding new creators every day. We have guest passes. It's really incredible. And speaking of incredible, Nebula is already a steal at $60 a year, $5 a month. But if you go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut, you can get a year of Nebula for $36. That is $3 a month. It's an incredible deal. Again, go to go.nebula.tv/thenandocut. You're going to love it. But that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching. I'll see you around. Bye.